Persuading people to take the actions we want can be hard. Our teams and clients are bombarded with thousands of messages every single day. But there is a way for you to get above the noise. Stories. This is the Stories with Traction podcast, and I'm your host, Matt Zaun. Join my guests and me as we unpack the power of storytelling. We'll talk about topics like leadership, sales, and marketing, all through the lens of strategic storytelling. Enjoy this episode. Today, we're going to talk about creativity and the disconnect when it comes to business and creativity. A lot of business leaders love to talk about innovation. How do we innovate for our clients? And that's awesome. I'm not taking away from that. But it's very rare we talk about creativity. And that's what we're going to dive into today. Because today I'm joined by Barbara Zerfoss. She was a former marketing vice president for a multi-billion-dollar corporation. Today, she is a Vistage Chair and leads CEO, business owner, and key executive peer advisory boards. In addition, she's a published author, a ghostwriter, and a novelist. In fact, her latest work is a suspense novel titled As Time Unfolds. Welcome to the show, Barbara.
Thanks, Matt. Glad to be with you today.
Thanks for your time. I very much appreciate it. And I love the topic, creativity, because I know what it's meant in my life. And I know that when business leaders truly embrace creativity, they're able to utilize that for better products, better services, and to deliver even more value to their clients. So I want to talk about creativity. I want to talk first about the disconnect. So one of the things that I've seen, and one of the abilities that I have going all over the country, different industries, working with different leaders, is there seems to be this notion of stiff-arming creativity. So what I mean by that is, again, people love talking about innovation. They love looking at data, and they like understanding, okay, how do we do a machine over here to crank out more of what we need and to be very innovative? But when it comes to creativity and putting our minds in a spot that we can be creative, and sometimes it might look a little silly to get certain ideas out to find the one that works, it is not as well embraced. So can you talk about what creativity means to you? When I say the word creativity, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
Believe it or not, the word business came to mind.
Really?
I believe creativity is so critical to business success. Creativity from the leaders, from their teammates, and everyone involved.
So that's interesting. So when I think creativity, I think more music, more arts, more plays. And I think of writing. So you being an author, when you write a book, one, it can be very daunting, I guess, depending on I guess it doesn't matter how you do it. It's going to be daunting regardless, but we need to tap into really creative state. So I like to hear that you view business as creative 100%. So speaking of that creativity, what separates someone that is in a leadership role? So they're dealing with all kinds of aspects of management and maybe production, and they have so many million balls in the air when it comes to sales and marketing, but how are they able to latch onto that creativity? What have you seen that separates someone in the business world that is willing to be creative versus someone that is not willing to be creative?
I've worked with everyone from, and still do, from entrepreneurs to rocket scientists to heads of multi-billion-dollar global corporations, and I've seen them all show creativity to succeed. If you're leading a company, you got to be a MacGyver. You got to be ready for anything that's thrown at you. Be creative. You're going to have struggles, problems, etc. It's a story in essence that just keeps on giving and keeps on going, and you never know where the plot's going to take you next.
So when you say you have to be willing for anything, and that's 100% right. I mean, anyone in business knows that there's so many unexpected things that come up. There's so many different things that they're doing. One of the things, though, and correct me if I'm wrong, to really tap into creativity, we need to put ourselves almost in a relaxed state. right? And there's a lot of people that will journal, or they'll go for a walk, or they'll listen to music, or they'll pull themselves out of their natural state in order to tap into creativity. And what you just described sometimes can be people are frazzled, right? They could be really stressed. So how do you take someone that is balancing so many things and get them in a state where they can be relaxed so they could start to have those creative ideas?
So here's where I use both sides of my brain is I take them with story, using story, I take them into the future and I ask them to play along with me. And sometimes I've used a scenario where I'm a newspaper reporter and I've come to visit them. This is a business case I'm sharing. I've come to visit them in their company because they've just achieved outstanding results. And we're going to feature them in a major business article. Then I ask them, tell me all you've achieved. And then I get them to start sharing. They're in the future. So they're looking back. They sense that they're already there, that all that effort is over with. They've won the prize. And now they're just sharing. So they let down the guards and the mind just opens because they're in creative play now. Because I asked them to play along with me. And then I asked them, help me write my headline. And Matt, it's amazing. Even in business groups, I've worked with engineers, IT people, physicians groups, lawyers, and other manufacturers, you name it. But it's amazing. The groups that I feel sometimes would be the least creative have astounded me the most with this exercise and have come up with just amazing breakthrough thoughts and creativity.
Wow. Okay. So let's clarify that. All right. So you're tapping to both sides of the brain by transporting yourself into the future. So you're envisioning every great thing that's happened. So how far in the future is this? Is this 5 years, 10 years, 20?
I say the end of the next year.
Okay. Oh, wow. Okay. So the end of the next
pretty
year.
Tight. So
Okay.
It depends. I've done it both ways. I'll do it just 1 year. Sometimes I'll do 3 years. I don't go out farther than that. I feel like you lose people.
Like a stretch goal, but in a year into the future.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect. And then after they do that, your next part of that process is you ask them to write their headline regarding that, right?
For the story.
So what does that do? So they're writing a headline. Is it to create a mantra of where they should be focused? Is it to what would be the reason behind the title?
It encapsulizes what they've achieved in just a short, few words that they can all say, wow, yeah, that's it. And it's the creative side. It just gets people thinking creatively, chunking it down. But they all engage. There's not a person in the room, I can tell you, I've done it so many times, that does not fully engage, no matter how quiet a person they are, they're not used to sharing. They get engaged with this because, as I said, I've told them they've already won. They've already achieved. I don't tell them what. I'm letting their mind imagine what could be so incredible that a major newspaper, or major magazine, or major TV station is coming to feature them for incredible achievements, for innovation, creativity, breakthroughs, whatever they want me to help them work on.
All right, so here's what I love about this, that you don't just say things, you actually do them. And I know that you do them, Barbara, because you've taken me through this exercise. So it was a year ago, I had the opportunity to meet some of your executives. You actually took the audience through this exercise. So here's what I want the audience to know, how powerful this is. I don't remember all the different questions you asked, but I remember you had us thinking of the future regardless of obstacles.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
And there was
time, money, everything aside.
Exactly. And there's been so much talk about the R word, right?
Mm-hmm.
Recession.
Mm-hmm.
And my mind went to how I dealt with the Great Recession. And it told me how I can deal with any other obstacles that come up regarding the economy. Okay, so here's how beautiful this exercise was. It prompted an incredible story in me based on this exercise in a matter of moments. Okay. So a lot of times people will be staring at a blank sheet of paper and they'll think to themselves, I want to create a masterful story. And they're just staring at the blank sheet and they try to write it from start to finish. So here's where my mind went. When the Great Recession happened, I'll never forget this. I was actually in my gym. I was working out and I was running on the treadmill. And a lot of gyms, imagine like the 20, 30 TVs, around the treadmills. And they were announcing on the television what this meant economically speaking. This is when President Bush, George W. Bush, was getting on TV and saying how terrible this was going to be and how painful it was going to be for the American public. I'll never forget this, right? I was running on the treadmill. And I remember when I was I wrestled for 10 years. I started very young. I wrestled through all of high school, some college. And my father, who was an incredible encourager, incredible motivator, and part coach when it came to wrestling for me, would always tell me to just keep running. Okay, so keep running, keep running. Basically, his point was if you create the endurance, when you get to the wrestling mat, you're going to be okay. So I'm on this treadmill and I'm running. And I'll never forget thinking to myself, regardless of how painful the economy gets, regardless of how challenging things are going to be, I'm going to keep running. And I took that mentality with me, and it was tough, but I had so much self-growth during that time. It was such an incredible time for me when it came to business. So here's why I'm saying all that. That exercise prompted that whole story. I took that story, I've shared it verbally in certain talks, I've shared it on social media, I've created blog posts regarding this, I've shared that story now numerous times, and there's been a residual benefit based on it. I position my father as the hero. He's the individual telling me to keep running. The point was, regardless of how challenging things can be, if we focus on growing ourselves, we can grow our business, we can help our team members. So, and that happened in moments based on what you did, that exercise, that prompting. So I really appreciate that, because a lot of times creativity can be agonizing for people, and it doesn't need to be that way. So do you do similar exercises when it comes to your books? How do you write a book when it comes to the creative aspect?
It usually starts with just writing down on a blank sheet of paper some random thought, what seems random at the time, or a random, really, when I say story, I mean like one page of something or 2 pages, just, a character saying or doing or a predicament. And before I know it, it's turning into something, and I'll be walking through a room and like with this last book, I started hearing characters talking in my head, and they never stopped for months, actually. It was quite the journey. But it just starts with the blank sheet of paper. Like I said, sometimes a random idea. You just don't know where it leads. So what I try to do all the time is always have paper with me or my phone to jot down whatever I'm hearing in my head or something I see that just sparks a thought. And I don't necessarily think, oh, this could be a book, or I could write a story about this. It's just something that intrigues me, or literally, like I said, something I see or hear in my head.
This next question might be tough to quantify. So just maybe ballpark, right? It doesn't need to be the exact percentage, but based on everything that you write, how much of that do you think does not get published? So if you were to say, if you're writing, let's say, 200 pages, did you have to write 500 to get the 2, or how much of it gets thrown away and doesn't become the precision that we see?
Okay, with actually writing like my novel as time unfolds this last time, I would say stuff that I threw out, 15%. Yeah, I'd
Okay.
say 15%. Not a high number. I mean, there were scenes that I threw out as I was going through the editing process, maybe 15%. Pretty much I'm zeroed in. By the time I sit down to write and focus, I know I've plotted it. In my case, I'm an outliner. I plot it out first, usually with index cards across my window here in my home. And so I can see it. I've got to see it like a flow chart. The story is flowing all from beginning to end.
Yeah, so that absolutely makes sense. So really it goes into the preparation. You have for lack of better words, almost an absurd amount of preparation, knowing if you prepare, you're sharpening that tool, so to speak. It's going to be easier when you're using that tool to get the result that you want. So a lot of preparation, and then only 15% is what gets thrown in the trash, which is astounding, by the way. That is a very low percentage. But for someone just getting started, tapping into their creativity, let's say that they need to write a talk that they're going to be delivering to their team, or let's say that they have a larger company event where they really need to be vibrant and inspiring. And so for someone like that, it's not going to come as easy as it is for you, because you've already gone through that process. You've already learned the proper amount of prep work. You've already learned how to organize your index cards and the flow. So can you give hope to someone that's just starting out when it comes to the content piece, that there could be substantially more that they're going to have to throw away?
I would take a page from your book, Matt, and I tell them, think of a story to share, and then write their speech or presentation with legs coming off that story and points they want to get across based on that story. Because if you're not accustomed to speaking, I think it's much easier to fall back on story. We share them every day with each other without even thinking about it. It's just conversation. Sometimes we don't realize it's story, and it can have great effect on people. So like I said, you're the master storyteller here. I know I'm preaching to the choir, but I would tell them to do what you do, Matt, as you do. You start with story and then make some points off of that and emphasize things, just share.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to, you mentioning preparation and positioning yourself not to have too much waste when it comes to what you're putting out. Based on what you said about the story and then legs coming off that story with the different points, that's a great way to not be wasting a tremendous amount of time. So I really appreciate you mentioning that. Now, one of the things I will say, just encouragement wise, this correlates with business to a point when it comes to creativity. I don't want people to miss it, is that when we see incredible artists, so when we see someone that just seems like they have it all together when it comes to word usage. So the person that comes to my mind is Bob Dylan. I'm a huge Bob Dylan fan. I think he's an incredible lyricist. He had to write a lot more than what we see and what we hear. So he was willing to go through songs that he might have considered mediocre or okay, nix them to get to the ones that we hear today and are played on the radio and are pretty much etched in musical history. So I don't want people to feel ashamed or embarrassed when they have to scrap something, or when it's just the first draft or maybe the second draft to get to what they need. And I also want people to feel empowered that when it comes to vibrant business leaders, so think of someone like a Steve Jobs that's on a stage and delivering content in front of millions of people. That speech that we're hearing is not the first draft. Right? There were different things that went into that to become the final product. So I think it's important to just realize that, right? And we can all aspire to get to the level that you're at, Barbara, where it's only 15%.
Let me clarify. Let me clarify. When you asked that question, I was thinking in bigger, broader terms, like ideas and plot points and characters and that. Now, am I revising my wording over and over again? Absolutely. Absolutely. So when you were saying throwing out, I was thinking of whole swaths of ideas,
Okay.
something, not the iterations and revising and editing upon editing and just reading over my words. Oh, that's too many to count how much I've changed. And refine, try to make the point simpler and more precise, concise, and engaging, grab someone's emotionally. Hours and hours and thousands upon thousands of words, in and out, changing, rearranging, take the end of a sentence, make it the beginning of the next, just constantly.
So it really speaks to your ability to fall in love with the process, right?
Mhm.
Because if you didn't appreciate the process, it'd be very difficult to do that and to put yourself through that. And the same is true when it comes to business. If we're willing to block off time where it's on our calendar, it's blocked off, it's time that we're going to tap into the ability to be creative, that is really, really important, right? So no one can really see this when it comes to audio, but I have an hourglass timer right here. And one of the ways that I use this is when I feel almost like a sense of writer block, so to speak,
Mhm.
where nothing's coming out and I really want to get those ideas out. I will flip this over, and as the sand is going down to the bottom, I'm telling myself in this time I'm going to just rattle off ideas, as many
Mhm.
ideas that come to my mind. I'm just going to keep going. And I actually have a whiteboard over here, and I have a large desk where I could put out a ton of different papers. And I'm just almost going crazy, so to speak, because this is almost like the silly stage. You mentioned, Barbara, earlier that creative play, right? So we're just playing with ideas, idea, because in my mind, it's much better to have a problem of a surplus of ideas versus a deficit.
Mhm.
Because if you have 50 ideas and three of them are amazing, isn't it great to have those three amazing ideas? Like I was willing to go through the 50 ideas to get the three. So, what are some other exercises when it comes to creativity? So, I love what you talked about thinking in the future. Are
Mhm.
there some other prompts or some other exercises or maybe creative play ideas people can employ to get more ideas out?
One thing I do for myself, and I encourage other people, is to get outside. Nature is an incredible place for new ideas to just pop into your head. And wherever is someone's normal place of working, they need to go somewhere else. It might be one block down the street. It might be just out their front door, standing on their front steps. It might be if you work in the office, go take a walk in the warehouse. And along the way, someone's going to stop you and talk to you, and you're going to see something. But it's just stopping, taking a break, and changing your atmosphere. Just a little bit. Walking from room to room can even make something new pop in your head. I'm not so good just sitting and forcing myself. God bless you, Matt, because if I put a timer on me and that I had to, in my days of corporate world, I had sometimes moment to jot something down that a president was going to get up and share because I had some speech writing times, not politics like you, but in the corporate world. So you got to be quick. And I am quick and fast. I love, love, love the process. I really get into the writing process. However, I am a woman of results. And unlike many writers or would-be writers who are fixing to write and fixing to write the book and fixing to this, as we say down south, they never finish. I'm a finisher. I'm results oriented. So I do love the process so much, but I don't start what I don't intend to finish. So I,
Sure.
I break it up. For me, it's just breaking up. And that's advice I would give to someone else. Great that you can sit there. I guess I'm too fidgety and I need to get up and just change and let for me I have to break concentration sometimes in order to get it, if that makes any sense, to get focused on an idea. I do though have an incredible ability to focus when I'm writing. My husband says when I'm in the zone, a bomb could drop next to me, it will not break my concentration. And I hate to share this, but when my kids were little, sometimes I would be so focused in some project, if not writing of some work project and working after hours. And they would have, finally hear them saying, earth to mother, earth to mother. I'm embarrassed to share that, but it's the truth. I can really, really focus. So for me, breaking focus sometimes, when an idea is not coming, get outside, walk through the room, go talk to somebody, go to sleep, wake up in the middle of the night. I do that a lot with an idea, and I have to get up and write it down immediately or it's gone.
So you bring up a lot of different a lot of elements to unpack with what you said. So let's
That would
talk
be
about.
me. Sorry,
No,
Matt.
no. I appreciate that. I very much appreciate that. So let's dive into a few of them. So one thing I think is really important that you indirectly said is everyone can have their own process that works for them, right? So
Yeah.
for me, I have my timer and I'm setting aside 30 minutes. I'm just going to rattle off every topic under the sun. So for you, it's changing your environment. It's, you had mentioned breaking focus, going outside and allowing that to empower you to tap into creativity. So it's not a one size fits all. It's not a cookie cutter situation. We can all tap into creativity different. I think it's a really good point. But also, you mentioning the outdoors brought up something that I refer to as environmental priming. There are people in the acting world that would refer to it as that as well. So environmental priming is when the brain learns to associate certain locations with certain behaviors and kinds of thinking. Okay. So the most powerful example of this from a directing, script writing perspective was in 1983, James Cameron, the director, was asked to write three scripts at the exact same time: Aliens, Rambo, and Terminator. Okay. So I want people to think of this. Imagine
Wow.
writing these screenplays simultaneously. And what he did was genius. It goes back to that environmental priming piece. He set up different desks, so different workstations. And at each workstation, that is what he was focused on. So he had one for Aliens, he had one for Rambo, he had one for Terminator. So he would go into different offices, different desks. He was transporting himself into that specific work.
World.
And like
World.
in this room, I'm focused on this movie. In this room, I'm focused on this movie. So when you had said, getting outside, going for a walk, it's almost like an environmental priming piece where if you have trained your brain, this is when I'm going to be creative. This is how ideas are going to come to me. Going to that spot is very, very helpful. So I appreciate you mentioning that. I think people can really take that and run with it.
You asked about a creative process or a way of getting people creative a while ago, and I thought of one that actually I did when I was a young girl. My sisters would have their friends come over, and I'm not sure which one of their friends started this story, but we'd sit around the kitchen table, and it was playing a game. And now I realize that it's what improv people do. But, I was 8, 10, 12 in there and with my teenage sisters and their friends. And they would just one person would start the story. And it would be, a man walked down the street and you're sitting next to him and you say, he was wearing a black hat, but no shoes. And then you point to the next person, they continue and you keep on going. So I was surrounded by, creativity probably without realizing it.
I love how I love the just stories. Again, going
Stories.
back to that story piece where you're throwing a suggestion out and people take it and make something
Yeah.
creative of it. So it brought me back to Mark Twain's house. Right. So
Oh,
I recently was able to tour Mark Twain's house. So anyone that is in the Hartford, Connecticut area, highly recommend going and touring. And one of the things that stood out the most to me was he had a fireplace, and above the mantle were different objects. Okay, so very obscure random objects. And he had 3 daughters, and every night their bedtime story had to include every single one of those objects. And every story had to be different, and every story had to have very specific parameters. And doing this day after day after day, it really positioned him to be more creative. And it's amazing. It speaks to the reps. You saying about, when you were younger and you're going through story after story after story, and you think about all the reps that you've had through the course of your life when it comes to the creative process and writing and ideas. And for anyone listening that might be busy, we still need to figure out a time to set aside to have those reps. So can you speak to just the sheer volume of reps that you've had? Because it's almost like a muscle, right? In order to train that muscle and have it grow, we need those reps. So can you speak to the sheer amount of reps when it comes to writing?
when you were sharing about the Mark Twain house, and I actually saw your post online about that, and now I want to go. it brought a story back to my mind, not just a story, something that really truly happened. I was writing on the bus to school, and I used to write for my high school newspaper, and I don't even remember who the person was who asked me, but it was some guy on the bus, fellow high school mate, and he had to write a story about something. I don't remember the details, but I do remember saying, "What have you got in your pocket?" And he pulled out like a quarter, dime, nickel, and a dollar. And Matt, immediately I wrote a story about what he had in his pocket. This is all while I'm writing on the school bus. So even though, like I said, I love the process and it can take some amount of time, but I also like to be quick. And sometimes those ideas just come. But things like that, writing speeches at work, writing brochure copy, my background's in marketing. I had the opportunity years ago. My company was advertising with Paul Harvey, the famous radio program. And I was able to write radio spots that Paul Harvey gave on air. And one time his assistant called, and these were radio spots like, this is the product, this is the price, these are the features, yada, yada. I was just following what people before me had done. And Paul Harvey's assistant called me up and said, these are great. Your company's spending all this money, but Paul asked me to call you and ask, do you have any stories he could share? And I fell back in my chair and I went, stories. Wow. I'm the story girl. You mean I can supply a story to Paul Harvey? So anyway, I started calling salespeople and our customers out in the field and got some stories to send in that he was able to put the Paul Harvey spin on them and share about our company and products. It was awesome. That's some of the, if that's what you mean by reps,
Sure.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate that. So here's what's amazing. All right. So I want everyone to hear this. So you're on the bus, you ask him to put his hand in his pocket, pull out what's in his pocket, and use that as a prompt. So yeah. I know all right, so someone's listening, thinking, but Barbara, a lot of people don't keep things in their pockets, right? So what do I do? So watch this. I just put my hand in my pocket and here's what I'm going to pull out.
Your phone, right?
My phone. Yeah. So check this out. So here's what you just gave us, Barbara. So here's what I'm thinking of. I go on my phone and now I'm going through pictures right now. So think of everyone that has a phone, all the pictures you have on your phone, and start scrolling through the pictures and think of all the prompts. So I'm looking at pictures of my children, different places that I've been, different things my wife has sent me. All those can serve as idea prompts to get the ball rolling.
Incredible. And great social media, LinkedIn, whatever, post, just ideas, period.
For sure. So I appreciate that. I really appreciate you sharing that.
Thank you for bringing me into this century. Pull out the phone.
There we go.
I love it. In fact, just a few weeks ago, I was looking on my phone and I did do that. I went to Ireland and Scotland on a trip, was thinking about writing a new book. Nothing came to me over there. I thought, I'm going to get away and I'm going to get all these ideas for a new book. I come home, I go, oh my gosh, nothing happened, nothing popped. I'm looking through my phone and I see a picture of me in a hat that I bought in Ireland, holding a lamb, as a matter of fact, overlooking the ocean. But I looked at that Irish handmade hat and ideas popped, and that hat will be a piece in my next book.
Wow.
That's how it happens, Matt.
So I appreciate that you said
that's a secret.
Yeah, nothing was coming, nothing happened.
No.
I really wanted something creative, nothing, and then a prompt, and then you had an idea.
Did.
I really like that.
Brilliantly fits with the story of the book. And I had no idea at the time. I had no idea.
That's awesome.
I was scrolling through the photographs, not looking for ideas, just looking to experience that trip again.
I look forward to reading that book as well. So you'll have to keep me posted on when it comes out. And Thank you for this conversation. Thank you for everything that you shared. I very much appreciate it. So there's three specific things that I'm going to have as takeaways from this conversation. So the very first thing that you said that really stood out to me was taking yourself into the future. So think of a year into the future, think of what it could be, and then write your headline. I think that's a powerful exercise to bring out creativity. So I appreciate that. That's the first point I'm going to take away. The second is the sheer amount of preparation you put in to your work. You mentioned having index cards and you mentioned having the flow of the story. And for someone that might not be an author or an aspiring author that's trying to write a book, they still might have staff meetings that they need to present at. And you said another exercise people could do is start with a story and then work certain legs off that story. Those are different points off that story. I thought the preparation aspect was a really good point. And then the third and final piece that I really appreciate you mentioning really speaks to what I had said, the environmental priming, where you said just get up out of your office, go for a walk, get into nature, and really start allowing certain environments to prompt creativity. So those are my three big takeaways. So I very much appreciate this conversation. If anyone wants to get more information on you, what you do, they want to inquire about your services, where's the best place they can go to get that information?
Yeah, they can go to my website, thezerfossgroup.com.
Perfect. I will include that in the show notes. People could just click and go right there. Thanks again, Barbara. I very much appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Stories with Traction podcast. Please leave a review, since positive reviews will make it easier for others to find this conversation. Next episode will launch on Friday at 8 a.m. Eastern. Until then, remember, if you want to persuade with power and inspire those around you to action, you must share more stories.